something I think that when couples read your book, they're going to say, whoa, spirituality is not to be acquainted with going to church.
Yeah.
Again and again, as a pastor, I've seen this. You know, he's a Christian guy. I mean, when we were dating, he went to church with me, and he still comes to church with me. But man, at home,
Yeah.
you know, he's something else. He's beating me, or he's abusing the kids, or but he's a Christian. He's going to church.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you say?
You know, often, Jim, when I'm counseling couples before they get married, I always raise this question about the spiritual issues.
Yeah.
And often the common answer is, oh yes, he's a Christian, he goes to St. Joseph, or he goes to somewhere, you know. Yeah. And that's supposed to be it. Yeah. You know, they go to church, or they're a member of a church. But we know there's all kind of Christians. I mean, there's Sunday morning Christians, there's Christmas and Easter Christians, yeah. There's daily devotional Christians, you know. And what I'm saying is you have to explore the foundation of spirituality much deeper than we're both Christians and therefore everything is fine. You have to dig into what are their basic beliefs about Christ, about God, about prayer, about the Scriptures, and how do they practice these things. And this is not hard to discover. If you keep your eyes open, you can tell before you get married.
And you do have to keep your eyes open, because what you hear may not be necessarily the truth. I mean, people are putting on their best behavior when they're trying to win someone into a marriage, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Trying to say what they think the other person wants to hear, and really, you know, intentionally trying to win the other person. The old English word is to woo.
Yeah.
But to watch them and to observe is another matter.
And also to talk with their friends.
Yeah.
Because sometimes they're with their friends when they're not with you. And their friends have a different opinion of them than you have. You know, you may talk to a guy's friend, for example, and he may say, you know, Bob or Joe or whatever his name is, yeah, he begins to tell you something about him that you find it hard to believe. But listen, this guy's seen it. Listen to what he's saying. You see, when we're in love, we tend to push off what things people say to us about our potential spouse. I think we have to be serious, we have to listen to them, and then we bring it up with the person. We discuss it with the person.
This is like relational due diligence.
It is. It is. And I think before we get married, Jim, we need to explore the spiritual foundation, because the spiritual foundation affects everything else in the marriage.
Yeah, absolutely. Your last chapter, by the way, the appendix, Developing a Healthy Dating Relationship, I thought, boy, that's maybe that should go at the front of the book. But personality profoundly influences behavior. When I read that chapter, I thought, boy, is this ever true? And I'm really wondering, have you ever suggested to couples that they do a personality test, you know, and discover what the other person is like from just a psychological profile?
Yeah, I think that's always very healthy to do that. Many couples don't do that, but whatever profile you use, and there's many of them, you need to know something of how the patterned way in which this person responds to life. You know, we talk, for example, about optimistic people and pessimistic people. Those are very different orientations to life, and it's a personality trait. And the question is, if this person's basic personality trait is always to see the negative and always to come across pessimistic, is that okay with you? To live with that for the rest of your life? Because typically, they're not going to change radically. They can have what I call significant growth, but it's not going to be radical growth. They're going to tend to always see the negative side. And that's just one little trait, of course. You know, one of the things in my marriage, there are morning people and night people. I didn't know that. And I dreamed that my wife and I, once we got married, would have breakfast together and have devotions together. We're going to start the day together. And after I got married, I found out my wife was not a morning person. She doesn't do mornings, you know, and that dream had to go. Fine, we can live with different personality patterns, but if we know what they are before we get married, we're less likely to be disappointed and frustrated once we get into the marriage.
What do you say to and it's usually the woman more than the man, who says, yeah, I know this, I know that, and you're right, he's this, he's that, but I'm going to change him.
Yeah.
What do you say to that?
Well, we don't change people. We influence people, yeah, but we don't change people. You know, we influence people every single day. If the husband walks into the room, he's been at work, he walks in, he gives his wife a kiss and gives her a hug and asks her how her day has been, he's influencing her in a positive way. If he walks into the house, doesn't even go find her, gets him something to drink, flips on the TV, sits down and watches TV, he's influencing her, but in a negative way. So we do influence each other, but we don't change each other. And basic patterns don't change unless a person has a radical encounter with God. You know, they may have something in their life, and God can change. God can change people, but we don't change people.
Is that ever true? It's just from my own experience, and I'm not a professional like you when it comes to counseling, but just from my own experience as a pastor, again and again and again, I meet with disappointed women who said, you know, I thought I could change him, but he's still the same guy. Yeah. Final comment. In terms of your own marriage, you're very transparent about your own marriage, which I think really lends a lot of credibility to the book. What do you think was the toughest challenge that you faced in the first, say, 10, 15 years of your marriage? The toughest one? Well,
it's hard to say what was toughest because we had a hard time in many areas.
Yeah.
But I think one area was I did not know how to process differences. You know, when you're in love, you don't think you're going to have any differences. Yeah. And all these things started coming out when I came down off the high. And I found out I didn't know how to process them. So what I did is what I thought, you know, most people do, I think. I tried to explain it to her because I had the idea any sane person would understand what I'm saying. Now, I want to tell you this one more time. And I tried to convince her, in whatever the conflict, that my idea was the right idea. I had no concept of knowing how to listen to a person, try to understand how they're processing it in their mind, and be able to say, you know, I hear what you're saying, and it makes sense. I still may not agree with it, but I can honestly say if I listen long enough, it makes sense. Now, we see it differently. How can we process it? How can we solve the problem? I didn't have that concept. To me, it was an argument. You won the argument because you were on the right, and you know, and they were wrong. And consequently, that alone caused us an awful lot of heated, you know, tension in our marriage.
Is this Venus-Mars polarity? You know, women are from Venus, men are from Mars. We think differently, we see the world differently?
Well, that's part of it. Yeah. But part of it is just being human.
Yeah.
Any two humans are going to think differently, they're going to feel differently, they're going to process thought differently. And so we have to learn how to respect them as a human, made in God's image, and affirm what they say, even if you don't agree with it. Try to understand it, how they could think that way, and focus on finding a solution rather than winning an argument.
Give me your website again.
5lovelanguages.com.
5lovelanguages.com. And viewers, I know you've been fascinated by this conversation. If you want to know more about Gary Chapman and the books he's written and a lot that he has there on his website, 5lovelanguages.com. Can get you right to this man. This book, Things I Wished I'd Known Before We Got Married. Gary Chapman, author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, The 5 Love Languages. This man knows what he's talking about and has a huge audience with proven wisdom. By the way, friends, I should mention this. The e-store has the book. Crossroads.ca/e-store. You can get the book. You're going to want that. You're going to want it. Thanks for coming our way.
Thank you, Jim. Great to be with you.